Hello, I'm John Bullard with the Robert E. Howard Foundation, and we'd like to welcome you to the Foundation's YouTube channel. We hope to use the channel to talk about our favorite pulp writer and poet, Robert E. Howard, his works and influence on parts of modern culture. I thought for our first Talking Heads video, we would introduce the Foundation to you. If you've never heard of it or aren't exactly sure what it does, this is the one video to let you know what happens and what we are doing. So to do this, I have two folks that are longtime Howard fans and scholars and were and are involved in the creation and running of the foundation. First, we have Howard Scholar Emeritus and Foundation President Rusty Burke. Rusty, you want to tell the folks a little bit about your involvement in the world of Robert E. Howard?
Well, it started out by joining the Robert E. Howard United Press Association back in 80 something, back in the 80s. And when I moved to New Orleans, then I became for some reason, they lost their minds and they elected me to be the official editor. And after 2 years of never getting a mailing out on time, they let me continue as a member. And actually, that's where I got to meet Glenn Lord. He came over for a union meeting in New Orleans, and a mutual friend, John Guidry, and introduced me to Glenn, brought him over to my apartment and introduced us.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been involved in Howard since the early 80s.
Oh, okay. And you've done many things. You created the Dark Man Journal for scholarly writings on Robert E. Howard. Uh,
Another thing I had trouble getting out on time.
and you were the person who created the first Howard Days for everybody to first go to Cross Plains and see the Howard House and everything else.
Well, in a sense, I just invited a bunch of people to come and join my at my apartment in Houston and get in a van and go to Cross Plains and check it out. Because by then I had met, or I knew of the Billy Ruth Loving, the librarian, and Joan McCowan, the president of the Friends of the Library. So
Okay.
it was great to go up and meet them. And by that time, we got to get out of the van and walk around the outside of the Howard House. The Carters who lived there, Mr. Carter came out and introduced himself, but he said his wife was sick, so we couldn't go into the house at that time. Wasn't until Project Pride bought it after the Carters passed on that we were able to get in the house. Boy, was it a dump.
Well,
It's
next,
amazing. If people who have only seen since Project Pride fixed it up would be amazed at what a dump it had been.
well, I've seen some of the photos of what the house looked like, I guess, in the 1970s, where it was all overgrown with vegetation and not looking very good at all.
Well, I can't blame him. I mean, Mr. Carter was pretty old at the time, last time I met him, and he was fairly short. So reaching up and cutting down vines and stuff, it's not my idea of a good time even now.
Yeah.
And certainly, even, back in the 80s, it wouldn't have been my idea of a good time.
Yeah.
So I can hardly blame him for letting it go to hell.
All right. Next person we have is probably one of the busiest men in the foundation and one of the hardest working men in the world of Robert E. Howard, Paul Herman. Paul is the treasurer for the foundation and the grand poobah of the foundation press. So, Paul, if you could tell us a little bit about your involvement with Robert E. Howard.
Gosh, it started when somebody handed me a book at a party, probably right before I finished high school. And I just, it was a Conan book and I just freaked out and became a fan. And then a few years later, that would have been in like 80, it would have been in 76 maybe or 77. And then in 84, I moved to Houston and on a whim, I just called up Glenn Lord because his name was in the Conan book, and looked him up in the white pages, and went to visit him and had a lovely chat. And And he was great, and he was a gracious guy, and then he introduced me to all the other characters, became kind of a regular part of the conversation, and then just kind of, it's one of those hobbies that just kind of kept growing and mutating and adding new things all the time. I started publishing Howard or finding Lost Howard and then publishing it starting in '99. The collected the complete Yellow Jacket. A lot of that stuff had never been published. Um, it just kind of went on from there. Put together the complete action stories. The originals had never been reprinted. It was only the novel that had been printed, and of Breckenridge Elkins, Jen from Bear Creek, I just kind of kept going from there. And then the foundation came along, and I got joined that, and off we went. So we're it's just a hobby that's just kind of gotten away from me a little bit. So
Well, it gives you something to do now that you're semi-retired. So, all right. Going back, I guess, to the foundation itself, for a lot of people who don't know what it is, I thought I would probably just go ahead and read the, I guess, mission statement for the foundation. The Robert E. Howard Foundation is organized to foster understanding of the life and works of Robert E. Howard. Its goal is to honor Howard's legacy as a skillful, prolific, and successful writer in a wide variety of genres, including fantasy, regional, horror, action, and adventure stories. The mission of the foundation is to promote its belief in the importance of imagination and creative writing. To accomplish its goals and missions, foundation purposes may include acquiring, conserving, and managing archives and collections related to Howard, serving as a research resource. Who wrote that? That's so hard to say.
sorry, wouldn't it?
Serving as a research resource for scholars, historians, fans, and others interested in Howard and his legacy, promoting, awarding, and supporting scholarly efforts in young writers of the same genre, support of Robert E. Howard Days in Cross Plains, Texas, support of the maintenance and operation of Howard's home and museum in Cross Plains, Texas, which is listed on the National Register of Historical Places and owned by Project Pride, a community organization. Finally, making available through various channels all the works of Robert E. Howard. So besides you two gentlemen, who else was involved in the creation of the foundation?
You want to tell this one? You want me?
You can. Your memory will be better than, I just went back.
I don't know.
I forgot so much.
Yeah.
I didn't remember that we went back to the early spring of 2006.
Yeah, we met. We were invited to lunch. Rusty and I were invited to lunch with Fred Malmberg, and he had just recently taken over bought up most of the Howard rights, and he was coming to Cross Plains, and so he invited us to lunch at Gene's Feed Barn, and so me and Rusty and Fred Malmberg and a guy named Peter Sedorowski, who was another person in that company at the time. He has since left that company, but we all got together, and Fred said, I think there ought to be a nonprofit set up to work with Robert E. Howard. There's a lot of things that ought to be done, and it really is kind of falls in the bailiwick of a nonprofit. And he said, and he was willing to hire a lawyer to write up all the paperwork and do all and this probably would have been Howard Days 2005 maybe. And by the time, and so Rusty and I both thought it was a great idea, and we talked about the mission statement and kind of what it would involve and how we do things. And it was a little vague, we first started out, didn't really know what we could or couldn't do, and we didn't really know, at the time, Bob was not a wildly successful commercial venture. There was some very expensive books out. The comics, I think, had gone away for a while. There wasn't a lot of profit being made there when Malmberg took over. And so we didn't really know how long. Rusty and I both were kind of like, well, we'll see how long all this lasts. How long, not just the foundation, but, Howard stuff in general. We'll just have to see, because it'd gotten downtrodden pretty good. And I'm sure people could say, Fred Malmberg and Jay Zetterberg together, all the games and movies and TV shows they're working on, and the rebirth of the comics and the huge business, multi-million dollar business they built off of that might be why Howard might have a part of why Howard is so popular now. But I think it's me and Rusty mostly. Yes, so. Yeah, and it took a little less than a year, and his lawyer got all the paperwork together, and we got it all set up, and then we started the foundation. So,
You have anything to add, Rusty?
No, just that Fred was very, very insistent upon. He said he was a businessman, and he said the stuff that Del Rey is doing that makes money. I can't let you have that. But he said everything else that Howard wrote that can be within the bailiwick of this foundation. So Paul then drew up the first bylaws, as I recall, and they're much the same as the ones that you were reading.
Yeah,
Paul's always had a legal mind, so
being a
whereas I have an illegal
40-year lawyer, 30-year lawyer, you get that. So, yeah, and it was, when we first started, it was real fun because they kind of said, well, we need to get everything in print. And when we first heard that, we kind of took that as, well, there's a lot of unpublished stuff, and we need to get the unpublished stuff into print. We don't know if we'll do anything else after that. We may not be able, everything may run dry, or he may change his mind, because everything depends on his company giving us a license. And so he could revoke it anytime he wanted to. So it was going to be, so we started out with just 2 books, and we said, okay, we'll make 2 books. We'll be the poetry, Rhymes of Salem Town and Others. And then we'll do a prose book called Last of the Trunk, referring to Howard's famous trunk. And and then we started with stuff we had. Glenn Lord was still around, was willing to give us a bunch of stuff, and we loaded it all up, made 2, went and found first book and no artist. We just, found a print, and I had not done printing at that level. And so I had to, found a book company, and our printing press, and they said, well, we'll put artwork on it, don't you worry. But they did. But then for the next one, we started our trend of suddenly there's all these really good artists who love Howard, and it's just so nice. And so we got for the last of the trunk, we got Tom Foster, who's a guy in Memphis who does blues albums covers and won a Grammy doing that kind of stuff. A really good artist, and so he ended up doing our cover for Last of the Trunk, and it came out really good. And then once those came out, we didn't know how, and we all kind of, as a group, discussed how many are we going to print, what are we going to do, and we were just fronting the books. We didn't know how to get them up on Amazon. That's not our bailiwick. And so we said, we'll just print 300 of them and sell them, see how they do. And it turns out they took a while to sell, a few years, because the only time we'd sell them, we for a long time we only sold them at Howard Days, and then finally we got to where once we got a website up, which took a while, but once we got a website up, we started selling them on there too. But even that was challenging. So.
Did we finally sell out of the Rhymes of Salem Town?
Actually, it had a very poor jacket that was not well made, and so because of that, a lot of them have damaged covers, and so we ended up. I think we're running out of them, but I think we don't list them on the website because they're beat up. But you come to Howard Days, you've got maybe 4 copies left, and that book we're never going to reprint. Once we started the new series of everything, we didn't need that book. We didn't need Last of the Trunk. So those books, limited to 300, will never be redone. They are what they are.
So I read out, I guess, some of the aspirations and the goals of what the foundation wants to do. What has the foundation been able to do on meeting some of those goals and its existence?
Well, they've, I don't want to talk the whole time if Rusty likes to get to work again. He knows how I am, so. Um, no, we've done okay. That's kind of morphed as the years have gone by. Part of setting up the foundation was we wanted to have a way to raise money, and that was we decided on memberships, and that was one of the things we discussed over lunch that day was the tiers of membership and how much we charge and what they get for their money, and kind of went through that part to set that up to help generate the cash. Um, getting the works into print has been a process that we've done once and we're doing a second time, and we'll hopefully finish sometime late this year or by the summer of next year. We'll have everything done so that when it's done, if you want to read everything Howard ever wrote, you go pick up the entire Delray collection, which I think is 11 books, and then you pick up the entire Robert E. Howard REH Foundation Press set of 23 books, and you'll have everything that Bob wrote, except maybe his homework. That's a different book.
Then you have to get what's that book that Rob Ream did? Robert E. Howard and School Days in Robert E. Howard or something like that. It's got
Yeah.
all of his school notes and papers and stuff.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice of Bob to save his homework. I wish he would have saved his early drafts of Solomon Kane and Bram McMorran and Cole. That would have been nice too.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Yeah, but he kept the homework.
Well, he did probably save them. They're all just on the back of something else.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right.
I know that going back, because this is probably a question that people may think about us or ask us about, but is the foundation in charge of the Robert E. Howard literary estate in any way?
No.
Not in any way. So we have a license to print books. That's all the copyrights, all the copyrights, trademarks, anything like that is held by currently the company is called Heroic
Signatures?
Signatures.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that hold that. We just have a license to print the stuff we print.
And our license to print that stuff is from Heroic Signatures and Fred Malmberg, who's also a member of the board of directors for the foundation.
Yeah.
It's going over some of the other things the foundation does, in addition to putting out all of the other stuff of Robert E. Howard's writings. You mentioned Rob Ream's Robert E. Howard schoolwork books. We have an additional secondary tier of scholarly books that we put out. And what are those books about? And why do we put them out?
Well, because they're close to, they're either directly Bob or extremely close to Bob. So there's the Doc Howard letters, which shows a lot of the correspondence with the agents after Bob had died. There's the Howard photo album of all the known photographs of Bob Howard. What else in the secondary collection? The Brownwood Connection, the School Days in the Post Oaks. It has a lot of, it has all of his school paper things he had published, along with some commentary about where he lived and what he was doing at the time. So it kind of fills in more knowledge about Bob's life and the things he did, and kind of secondary. A lot of people kind of focus on the main literary products, and there was a lot more to Bob than just that, of course, and so it gives them a chance to see some of the other
there
stuff.
seems to be no end to people's fascination with Howard himself. And I think that a lot of that is part of what led me to invite all those guys to come up to Cross Plains for the first Howard days was, how did he create these worlds of imagination from basically nothing? And so there are people who are really fascinated by that and want to know more about his biography and are looking for specific things that might have led him to create this or that character or story. So
Yeah.
biographies are very popular. What, there are 5 now?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And then
And that was a big part of Howard fandom starting in, I guess, the 70s, was there were so many people doing research and writing about Rusty, of course, being probably the leading one in that group, um, which is probably why he was asked to be president. Because at the time, it was assumed that Rusty knew everything there was to know about, or at least that was known at the time. Rusty knew it. And that's why he got, hey, he's a nice guy, so he's probably dump it on him. So.
Plus,
whereas
as president,
we just dumped the work on Paul. So
That's right. I think I messed up there. Sorry.
yeah, I'd say that Rusty's probably the smartest one out of all of us because he just delegates or says, you go handle this or that. And he
Mhm.
doesn't have to do anything. So,
I've been doing that all my life.
Wise man.
My family would be glad to back me up on that.
Let me see what else. Let's go into some of the memberships of the foundation. We do have a 3-tiered membership of the foundation. And what is each tier and what do they get as benefits for joining the foundation? And what does their money go to that they give to us each year?
The 3 tiers are, the basic tier is $9.99, which is you become a member at that, and that we appreciate it. It helps. At the $50 level, we have Friends of REH, $49 level. It's Friends of REH. And that gets you the newsletter, which we've been putting out now for 18 years. Looks like that. And it was just one of those organic creations. We said, well, we'll make a newsletter. What are we going to put in it? And we were all like, let's put typescripts. And so it's turned into mostly the first appearance of any new things we found, a new poem, a new story, a new photograph, anything. First place it turns up in the newsletter that we do 4 times a year. And then otherwise we print early drafts, so you can see the original works that Bob did. An actual black and white Xeroxes of the actual original TypeScript pages that Bob typed. And we've done that for 18. We're in our 18th year now of publication of that. It's been at it for a long time, and we won't be running out of things to print anytime soon. So, and then at the $100 level, you get all that plus we once every other year or so, we'll crank out a special publication that will only go. I mean, like things like the Saga of Farringtown, which is a collection of the stories involving Farringtown. I think with a Rusty Burke intro, if I remember right. People of the Dark. And they've been at various, they've been all kinds of sizes and shapes. We've got all kinds of different artists. We've had people like Tim Truman do covers for us. We get all kinds of people doing work for us. Again, the artists like Howard, and so we know them, and they like us, and they don't mind us. But those are extremely limited, extremely hard to get. Yeah. They never, once they go out, we only, end up printing less than 100 of them, typically, for the top members. And so they're a tough get. If you don't already have them, they're a tough get. Indeed, we've got a set that a member who passed donated back to the foundation that we're going to have to sell off somewhere. I'll probably have to put them in an auction somewhere because they're gonna be people after those. So, but that's what you get. What it's for is, we as a regular basis, we've been handing out scholarships to a student at Cross Plains High School to help them pay for college. We've been doing that now for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. Last year it was up to $2,000, which is nice. We also help support the house in various ways. We give them books to sell. We give them a lot of that secondary material we talk about with secondary references. We'll give them copies of those to sell. We help out where we can. This year we installed some fans, some big ceiling fans on the pavilion to help out with that. And we're just kind of, they work with us and we get along with them and they get along with us, and we're always around to help, and occasionally throw more money at something that needs to be addressed if they need the help. And then we also do occasional special projects that are Howard related. The review of the Glenn Lord collection of typescripts and the sorting and organizing and scanning of all of that before it went to the Harry Ransom Center at the University of Texas. Over 13,000 pages. That was a big project to go through to pull all that stuff out of storage. It was stored in 4 different places. Had to pull it out and reorganize it and sort it and scan it. It took a while because we all have day jobs, or we all used to have day jobs. So it chewed a lot of time. And a couple years ago, we restored and returned Bob's original writing table. Was brought back to the house, and we paid for the restoration to get that done, and arranged all the transportation and all that. And then we also organize. Nowadays we regularly organize Robert E. Howard Days in June of every year. Our people help set that up and help put together the panels, and the foundation pays the guest of honor's expenses to get them there wherever they're coming from. So we have things we do. And then every now and then, like I said, something special comes along, we throw some money at it. The library, the Cross Plains Library, or something else that turns up that we think's appropriate.
I was going to say that one of the things that I've done is volunteered to take over the running of the annual Robert E. Howard Awards with Bobby Deary helping out. So that we do that each year, as the mission statement says, to recognize the scholars who've done very interesting articles on Robert E. Howard or his works, and people working in popular culture in terms of comic books, art, whenever they pop up, movies or TV shows. Had radio presentations, radio readings, radio dramas of some of his stories that have been nominated in the past, and always looking to help that out too. Are there any big upcoming projects that the foundation has on its or has in its sights?
I don't know about that. We're trying to finish up our second edition volume of books, and there's another 7 or 8 books I have to finish editing up, which they've already been real cleanly edited once by Rob, so it's a pretty minimal bit of work. Though we are updating, all the books are getting updates, and restored text. A lot of the books were printed before we got access to the Glenn Lord collection. Once we saw that, we said, well, we'd rather use the copy of Bob's final draft than what was first published. And so we have to go back and switch those and get all the editors' work back out of there to clean that up. So some books have not much, some have a lot. And we've added in some early drafts and a few other things that have turned up in the interim to go in there. So they all have something more than what was there before, more and different. There's a big project coming up on the house that we may or may not get involved in. We're going to see how much grant money they can line up to address it. And we may get involved with that. We'll see. Well, it just depends on, there are limits to what we can do. So depending on how major it gets, we may or may not, we may have a small piece of that, or we may do all of it, but I don't know. We'll have to see what the costs are going to be like. So that's one that's ongoing. That's the one we're currently chasing like crazy.
And I think you might have mentioned it, but the foundation is a 501c3 organization, correct?
Yeah, it's a true nonprofit. Nobody makes profit. All the board members get nothing for their efforts, but in no monetary return at all. Especially, they all come to Howard Days. They don't get paid for it. Everybody shows up and does the parts they do, and it's all for the love of Bob, to be part of the true 501c3. The press, of course, is a for-profit corporation owned by the foundation. So it pays taxes, but it donates all of its profits to the foundation. So it's that's the biggest source of income now for the foundation, is the sale of books. Just the money just flows straight. It gets donated straight into the coffers of the foundation.
Um, Rusty, you have anything else to add so far that we haven't covered or that you want to hit more on?
Not really. As Paul said, I'm a man of few words. He's not.
I am not. That's right.
You two work very well together.
Okay.
How about you, Paul? Is there anything else that you would like to add or?
I think Russ and I both can really appreciate how much Howard stuff has changed in the last 20 years. The foundation, it'll be our 20th anniversary next year at Howard Days for the foundation, 40th anniversary for Rehupa. And I think it's pretty impressive how much stuff has been accomplished. How much credit we get, I don't know, but I think we get some credit. And well, the people that have done the work, the people like Rusty and who writes the articles and does the scholarly effort. I'm more the Scribner guy. I do editing and handle the money. I don't do the creative research stuff like they do. But
Indy Bill Cavalier gets a lot of credit for
yeah.
being cheerleader, the welcome guy for all the newbies that come to Cross Plains every year.
Yeah. Yeah, we're real fortunate with the people we have working with us. It's a very intelligent crew that knows a lot, shares a lot, is willing to come in and give their 2 cents on everything we want to talk about. So I think it's good.
I think that would probably be a good idea to go ahead and list all of the members of the board of directors. And as you said, Rusty, Bill Cavalier is man in charge for Howard Days and is the prime greeter of people that show up for Howard Days, talking to them and making sure they feel welcome. You mentioned Rob, and that would be Rob Ream, who did a lot of the editing on the first editions on the foundation books and has wisely, after going through that horrors, decided to back off and let you take over, Paul, on the new ultimate editions. And we also have Mark Finn, Jeff Shanks, and Bobby Deary. And again, just to rename them, Fred Malmberg and Jay Zetterberg. And of course, Patrice Louinet, our doctor in France, who also originally did a lot of the editing. He did the editing of did he do all of the uh, original versions of the Del Rey books or just the Conan books?
Just the Conan books.
Okay.
Rusty did a lot of the other books.
And as you said, everybody pretty much has done this out of sheer love for Bob Howard and his works. Anything else that I haven't hit on or that y'all can think of or mention?
I think it's important to, one of the joys is that we get to come help kind of fund and set up and work with the Howard Days with Project Pride. And as Rusty said, that really has a lot to do with Indy setting the tone that it's a family get together. It's not a con. It's a family get together. You can sit down with whoever is there and have a long conversation about anything. And we get professional artists, we get other authors, we get all kinds of people. We had a bunch of bloggers and podcasters in this year that wanted to come in and talk about things. You never know who's going to show up out there. They've had Nobel laureates come tour the house, So I mean, it's impressive to see who shows up for Howard Days. If anybody gets a chance to do it, it's worth the time and trouble to come to Central Texas in the heat of early summer and enjoy the show.
I certainly say that my first Howard Days I was finally able to make it to in 2013. And the guest of honor was Tim Truman. And as we were all gathering there Thursday afternoon at the pavilion, meeting everybody, up walks Joe Lansdale, the author, and says, "Hey," and introduces himself because he and Tim Truman are great friends and work together at DC Comics. So it is, like you say, an incredibly exciting thing to go to Howard Days, to see who's there and just be able to talk to them in a natural setting.
Yeah.
Well, I think that will probably wind us down. So thank you too for your time and help in doing this video. Hopefully we'll be getting both of you on this channel again as we start talking about Bob Howard and his works and the upcoming videos.
Well, I promise not to run on and on and on again.
That's right. I
Well,
barely got a word in, man.
well, I do have this mute button, so I can mute you, Rusty. So keep that in mind. We hope this video has answered any questions that you folks have had that are watching it. If you watched it this far, thank you for watching it. If you can, give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because we do have upcoming videos on Robert E. Howard, his life, his works, and the people he knew. And we'll be seeing you soon.
And how to contact the foundation, info at rehfoundation.org. If you have any questions, want to ask, we get every week we get questions from people about all sorts of interesting things around Bob, and we're more than happy to either give you the answer or point you to where the answer can be got.
Because that was one of the things when I was talking with Stoley about setting this channel up, and he was watching the first video and he said, "Oh, you should have put down at the end of the video the web address for the foundation's website." And I was like, "Oh." So I'm learning as I'm doing this.
And the foundation presses as well. They're separate.
And yeah, the foundation press, that too. Thank you. I will add that in. So thank you, gentlemen, and we will see hopefully everybody else sometime soon when we do our next video. Thanks.
Thanks, John.